So we can go ahead and start then. We can start with introductions, starting with the debaters, and affirmation. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Amy Jayasuriya. I'll be the first affirmation speaker in today's debate, and my pronouns are going to be she, her.
My name's Lucy Barretto. I'll be the second affirmation speaker. My pronouns are also she, her, hers.
Hello, my name is Ria Jane, and I will be the first negation speaker from Washington High School. My pronouns are she, her.
Hi, my name is Renee. I'm also going to be on negation. I'm going to be the second speaker. My pronouns, my pronouns are also she, her.
Okay, and so for the judges, I'll start. I am Jacob. I'm the chair, and I go by he, him.
My name is Swathi Natarajan. I use she, her, hers. I did do debate in high school, so I'm fine with running K's, T's, and things, but I would prefer, I really want solid impacts, claims, warrants, and I will vote off the fly.
Hi, my name is Sandeep Adwankar. I go by he and his.
Okay, so Af, whenever you want to start, go ahead.
7 minutes. Everybody's ready? My time starts now. Hi, I'm Amy Jayasuriya, and I'm going to be defending the resolution that this House, if the technology existed, would allow medical procedures which endowed human beings with superheroes. We're going to be defining this round as a fact round because it is a statement of truth. This means that it should be weighed off the preponderance of evidence. So whichever team can provide you with the best evidence should be winning today's debate rounds. Let's get into the quick definitions. So we're going to be defining this House as the U.S. Department of Defense. Our one point under this is going to be that the United States federal government is the most predictable actor. So then the Department of Defense is the most predictable agency. Things with capability to destroy cities would be rendered military equipment if the technology existed, like how Lockheed and Barton are considered military contracts. It's fair because it's the only realistic use of superpowers, and historical precedent says that the Department of Defense is on the closet doing this. Our second point under this is that on wood, the only way the Department of Defense would test is to run the scenarios we are presenting in our speech. This is the way they would decide about the plan. Let's get into the solvency, or how this plan will be implemented. What we can see is that training would be required before people were actually given this technology, and there would also be psychological and physical testings to make sure only honest and good people get the super serum. What we can see is that this would create super soldiers. We can also see that collateral damage is going to be the main difference between the affirmation and the negation. What we can see is that through this training, we're going to cause a decrease in collateral damage, as there are going to be better surgical strikes with these super soldiers. The U.S. Department of Defense has been making super soldiers since World War II, but the methamphetamine they put methamphetamine into the rations in World War II to give them the fighting spirit. So what we can see is that there's been historical precedent that they have done this before, which means that the Department of Defense would be the #1 actor in today's debate. Let's come to the first contention. Our first contention is going to be that of surgical strikes decrease the amount of collateral damage. Our first claim is that U.S. wars cause a lot of collateral damage. The warrants under this is going to be that since the September 11th attacks, the United States government has carried out drone strikes in Pakistan, in Yemen, Somalia, Afghanistan, Iraq, and Libya. We can see that this has led to a lot of civilian casualties when they have done it through these drone strikes. Another example of this is that in the United States bombing of Afghanistan, Doctors Without Borders hospital, what we can see is that the military ended a lot of but we can see that the military ended a lot of civilian lives, and they called this incident an incident of collateral damage. So what we can see is that there's been a lot of collateral damage when the United States uses bombings and drone strikes to invade other countries. Let's go into the second claim, which is going to be that super soldiers make war surgical. So point A is that the U.S. Department of Defense always focused on making wars as clean as possible. Examples of this are stealth bombers, assassination attempts, and the CIA. Subpoint B under our second warrant is going to be that by implementing a super soldier, we're going to be decreasing collateral damage. With super soldiers, we won't have to fight the fight. No innocent people die. For example, a psychic tells the invisible soldier to go kill one person rather than a bomb killing 500. This is going to be really important because we're going to be decreasing the amount of like innocent people that are actually dying. We can also see that this is going to lead to less innocent people getting killed because their training stops them from causing mass civilian deaths. By having this training implemented in our plan, in our top of case, what we can see is that this is just, we're going to be training these soldiers so that they don't cause a lot of like mass collateral damage. We can also see is that in war right now, we don't have uniforms, so everybody looks the same. It's hard to detect people. An example of this is Al-Qaeda. So what we can see is that with superpowers, we can know who's who in Al-Qaeda, which is going to lead to like less death and less like death of people that actually aren't trying to be killed. Let's get into the impacts. The first impact is going to be that of more surgical war leads less collateral damage. We're going to be able to fight all of the same wars, win them faster, and minimize impacts. The United States is already a war machine. We're always in constant wars with other people, which cause a ton of collateral damage. But if we have a super soldier, what we can ultimately see is it's going to be extremely good, and it's going to be a surgical tool that will cause less damage. Examples of this are going to be things like super strength, super speed, and invisibility are just some of the examples of how the United States could like implement superpowers in order to stop like mass civilian deaths and cause like more surgical war, which is ultimately going to be more preferable. Our second impact is going to be that of less death, less civilian deaths, because strikes are able to be targeted much easier. What we can see is that a decrease in, this is going to lead to a decrease in death and dehumanization. We'll be able to kill 50 instead of killing 500. So at the point where if a super soldier was implemented in the United States through the Department of Defense, what we can see is the chance of like civilians trying to get like this armor is going to be really, really low. And it's ultimately going to be preferable because at the point where the United States is consistently like engaging in wars with like a large a number of countries at the same time, having surgical wars to like instead of like creating lots of collateral damage is ultimately going to be the most preferable, and you should be voting for whichever team can cause the least amount of collateral damage throughout. If we were to implement superpowers using the Department of Defense. Ultimately, for all of these reasons, I urge a strong vote for the affirmation in today's debate. Thank you.
All right, hello, my name is Ria Jane, and I will be the first negation speaker for this debate. So real quick, I'm going to talk about what I will be doing in this speech. First, I will be going over the top of case by the affirmative, so right before everything they said on their contentions. After that, I will go on to the negation case and talk about two negation arguments. Finally, I will be going on to my opponent's case and fully refuting it. All right. My time starts now. Judges, I'd like to bring attention to the fact that this is a really weird resolution. The resolution specifically is, this House, if the technology existed, would allow medical procedures which endowed human beings with superpowers. Does this sound weird to you? Because none of us have ever debated it before. That's the problem here. We need to debate this round as a hypothetical round because human beings with superpowers simply do not exist right now. That is why the resolution states if the technology existed specifically. Therefore, even though this round is really weird, we're going to debate it to the best of our ability, and we're going to debate it as if the technology existed for humans to have superpowers. The first thing my opponent comes up here and tells you is that this is a fact round based on preponderance of evidence. Judges, this is completely ridiculous. How are we supposed to have a factual round if there's literally never been superpowers in the entire history of the universe? This doesn't make sense. If you want to talk about facts, the only facts you're going to be getting is from superheroes and comic books. But finally, the last thing that I want to bring up is that my opponents talk about how the United States Department of Defense is the most predictable. We agree that the United States is a predictable actor. However, the Department of Defense specifically is not a predictable actor. Remember, their justification for using the Department of Defense was that, oh, the Department of Defense is working on the technology right now. But if you look to the resolution, it said if the technology existed. This is hypothetical. It does not matter how much work they are doing on it right now. The point is, as soon as we understand that this is going to happen, the medical technology exists. We just have to agree with that. Moving on, let's talk about the negation case. We have two major contentions that are going to be winning us this round. The first contention, and arguably one of the most important things, is on classism. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what classism is. We argue that if this resolution passes, the only people that are going to be able to afford this genetic modification are the only people that are able to obtain this genetic modification are the ones who can afford it. Think about plastic surgery. Think about any genetic modification that you see in the status quo. All of those things can only be taken in by the rich. You do not see like really poor people spending all of their money trying to like get plastic surgery implants because they want to spend it on their like actual food and a roof over their heads. So on top of that, you want to understand the biggest question that the affirmative does not take into account is who is in control of this technology. Now let's talk about specifically why having this technology would be a bad thing. Do you guys know what eugenics are? Eugenics are a movement that was popularized during World War II that argued that the population must be quote unquote purified by only allowing those with favorable traits to reproduce. This encourages racism, discrimination, and the extermination of all people that didn't fit the ideal Aryan standard. If we look back towards World War II, do you know what happened? Hitler argued that everyone needed to have this ideal face structure of being blonde and having blue eyes, and those people are the only ones that should exist in the population. All of the others, aka Jews, should be wiped out. That's exactly what's happening within these superpowers. We tell you that first of all, the only people that are able to obtain these superpowers are the ones that are rich or the ones that can actually afford it, because genetic modification is not free. Even if the technology exists, there's no guarantee that the technology is going to be made free for all. Second of all, there's no matter what, there's not going to be enough the people are not going to be able to get this technology. Some people, those people will be seen as undesirable. That is the really big eugenics argument that we are arguing right now. Although we do not have historical precedent for superpowers, we do have historical precedent for eugenics, and that is what we are winning on. Okay, what happens if we bring overly powerful technology into the world? The social elite will be the only ones with access to this. This technology is so powerful that the creators would never let it fall into the hands of the public. They would hoard this technology for the elite, only reinforcing class boundaries. Judges, I would like you to think about every single superhero novel or every single, like, in general, a story that you've read about a dystopian society. The dystopian society comes because a corrupt government or a corrupt certain group of people take this technology and use it purely for themselves. We have a couple impacts here that are really, really big. The first is classism. Whatever power that the social elite already have will already be proliferated. Ordinary people do not have access to this technology. This specifically leads to our second impact, which is discrimination. Any inequality that already exists will be reinforced and strengthened overall. And finally, and most importantly, eugenic movements increase. We've already seen this happen before. People will be encouraged to only reproduce with those who have the abilities. This ultimately leads to dehumanization, but I'll touch on that later. In the interest of time, I'm going to be going on to the affirmative case and then moving on to the negation case. Sorry about the confusion in the roadmap. All right, so first of all, I'd like to point out something really big in the affirmative case and all. My opponents do not even tell you what superpowers they are using. Judges, there are dozens of superpowers that I've heard of. There's invisibility, fire power, water power, earth power, whatever you want to call it. You could literally snap your fingers and everyone would drop dead, like in Avengers Infinity War. This doesn't make sense. If we don't even know what superpowers that we're arguing about, how are we supposed to have an actual round? I'd just like you to keep that in mind when you're taking it into your ballot decision. Now let's talk about contention one. They talk about less collateral damage. This is a really, really good argument for the negation side. The fact that my opponents brought up this argument is perfect because this is literally what's going to be winning us the round. We turned this entire argument. Having super soldiers is a really bad idea for multiple reasons. First of all, having more superpowers is always going to lead to more death. Why? Because having more powerful people is just like having every single military officer contain a nuclear weapon. They're going to use that and they're going to be more trigger happy. If they know that they have these superpowers, it's a lot harder for people to stop using them because they simply have it, which leads me to the second response. The second response is that if we have these super soldiers, it increases using the military rather than using diplomacy in the first place. What does this mean? This means that, like, think about it. When you have like this huge, a bunch of super soldiers with like infinite powers and you're going to go and you're thinking of going to war against China, instead of thinking the logical approach and thinking, hey, maybe I should, reason it out with them first, the US is going to think, oh, we are ultimately powerful. We should just go in and take over the entire thing, because they're going to use their military instead of diplomacy. Obviously, we can see that diplomacy leads to no death. Increased military use, no matter what, will lead to more death. That's a really big problem. But finally, the third example, not only do they not provide any reasons for why it's going to decrease civilian casualties, but then we also argue that in superhero examples, you will always have soldiers turn against you. Even if you buy their argument that oh, they're somehow going to get training, there will always be soldiers that go through this training and then turn against the United States as traitors. For example, there's Bucky Barnes in Captain America. Captain America's best friend was a really good person, but then once he got superpowers, his mind was corrupted by the entire the superpowers, and he turned into an evil guy. Finally, on their last contention, they talk about war being more surgical, but the problem is this contention, not only does it not have any links to why there would be more wars, but on top of that, I'd like to turn this argument and argue instead that it would cause an arms race, because if the United States creates superpowers, do you think every other country like Russia and China, do you think they're just going to sit back and do nothing? No, China and Russia, they will send spies in. They want to get that genetic technology as well. Therefore, all countries are going to have access to this arms race. And just finally, I'd like to talk about how they said, oh, we get invisibility and super strength. Imagine having super strength. Imagine having 1 million Hulk super soldiers just running around, not being able to control their anger. That's what you're seeing in the affirmative world. At the end of the day, you're seeing discrimination, you're seeing dehumanization, and you're seeing more death in the affirmative world. You shouldn't be voting for them, you're voting for the neg. Thank you.
All right. So it's going to be the top of case, and then the solvency block at the bottom. And can you flow the solvency responses on the negs disadvantage? Oh, sorry, just kidding. On our second advantage, or contention. So it's going to be top of case, solvency, neg aff, in order.
Oh,
Lucy, you're muted.
Bad. Thank you.
You can start over.
Okay. I think I got 10 seconds in anyway. All right. Starting time now. Again, Amy and I affirm the resolution. Let's first look at the top of case. On the fact round, and we're talking about fact round as in preponderance of evidence based off any sort of evidence we can find in relation to this topic, that can be analyzed and used with reasoning to create a cohesive argument. They don't really offer any sort of alternate weighing mechanism, so I don't see really what the argument here is, but we're going to go based off of evidence. This includes warranting and reasoning. They say that this is ridiculous, but we're going to see that the United States has been trying to develop super soldiers, like Amy says, since World War II. I think putting meth into the rations of soldiers is a pretty clear example. Drugs obviously enhance performance in certain areas and also detract from certain areas, but we can see that that is another example of trying to use alternate sciences in order to improve the performance of soldiers. So this isn't an impossible thing. Considering the amount of innovation that we have going right now in technology, it is pretty possible that we could add some sort of advantage to US military soldiers in order to enhance their performance that is based in technology and science. This is just an extrapolation of that concept. All right, next on this house, they say the United States federal government is predictable, but the DoD isn't predictable. Amy literally lists you a few reasons why the DoD is predictable. We see that when a certain thing carries them the capability to destroy an entire city or something like that, any sort of superpower that won't be contained if it's released to the public, or even guns. We see that Lockheed Martin is in a military contract because they create weapons, right? So if a superpower can be used as a weapon, that's automatically going to be deemed a military thing, which is why the DoD is the most predictable. Even at either way you go, they say the USFG is the most predictable, in which case it's going to still go in our favor. I'll get onto that in a minute. We're going to see that again, superpowers would be considered a weapon if they were used for a negative purpose, which is why the DoD would have control. All right, Go to the solvency block. They literally concede our entire solvency block. They basically say that we don't list any superpowers. That's their response that I have on solvency. First of all, Amy lists a couple superpowers at the end, but that's not even a sufficient response. In our solvency, we tell you that training would be required because, again, this is something that is considered a weapon. Like police are trained to use like guns, right? We see psychological and physical testing to make sure only honest and good people get the super serum. Unlike the police, where a lot of people, like bad people who don't have enough training, get like guns in their hands. We see that when this is an issue of military soldiers in the DoD, there would be heavy consideration of this, especially when it's like literally a superpower. Third of all, collateral damage is going to be the crucial thing here. And fourth, the United States DoD has been, again, making super soldiers since World War II. They concede all of this, which means you're going for the analysis that there would be sufficient training that the DoD would instill so that these people would not be gaining superpowers and then just be able to go rogue and do whatever they wanted with them. We see that if we were thinking realistically about this, which I think you should do in this round because it's a debate round where we're basing this off of evidence and any sort of reasoning we can get, the DoD would not be just like giving anyone these superpowers. They would be having significant checkbacks against security. All right, let's go neg now. The overview on the neg case is that civilians aren't going to get these superpowers. They do not do enough on the top of case to like contest our solvency, which means you cannot be buying their argument that literally anyone in the world can, or anyone in the United States could get this. First, on classism, there's one response here. First, this would not be open to the civilians. They say that the United States federal government is the most predictable actor, which means in what world would the United States federal government just release superpowers to every single citizen? Like, that is not a realistic thing. So at the point in which they concede the United States federal government is the actor and they're using that actor, this entire contention goes null because they do not explain to you why the United States federal government would be giving it to any sort of citizen, like just any random citizen. Second, they talk about plastic surgery. The response here is that plastic surgery is, again, like a private thing. The United States federal government doesn't distribute plastic surgery. So if the United States federal government is in charge of the technology behind superpowers, that means it wouldn't be just distributed privately. Third, they talk about eugenics. Okay, yeah, we agree eugenics are bad. We're never going to argue that eugenics are a good thing. So let's go with their analysis that civilians have it. If civilians have it and eugenics is on the rise, we would need the DoD to check back against that by creating super soldiers. So in any way, the affirmation is doing the most for safety. We see that if this technology is already in the hands of everyone anyway, what is the reason for the DoD to not be supplying this to the military in order to check back against any sort of bad things that would happen with eugenics in the United States? The second argument is that, again, it wouldn't be going to citizens, so eugenics wouldn't be on the rise because this would only be a military thing. Next, they talk about class boundaries and how this is a dystopian society. The first argument here is that we already live in a dystopian society. There are significant classism and issues in race and other prejudices. So we see that this is already a really bad place. This argument is non-unique because it really isn't a direct result of the plan. They say discrimination increases, eugenics increases, but that's already on the rise. And this plan doesn't directly link into that based on our framework anyway, which they don't do enough work on. All right, let's go into the AF. Amy, anything else on neg?
I think you're good.
Okay. On the AF, we talk about how surgical strikes is going to decrease collateral damage. This is going to be crucial in the round because they simply don't do enough on it. Their first response on this is that they're turning our advantage. They're saying it's good for their team because basically super soldiers become trigger happy. The issue here is that they drop our solvency, which means they concede all of the training that happens. They give one response to training. They say, oh, training, they say that training happens, but this actually wouldn't happen. That's not the case if you drop the entire solvency block that we give warrantation for, right? Like, we prove to you that the United States military has tried to do similar things in the past when we didn't have as much technology going on, right? Like putting meth, and that was something that was a step in this direction, right? So we see that if they were to go full on and actually have superpowers, there would need to be training. It's the most realistic thing. There would also be psychological and physical tests, like Amy says in our first speech, and they never contest this. A psychological test means that a white supremacist who happens to be a soldier is not going to get this if they're not passing a psychological test, right? So then they wouldn't get the superpowers. Their second response on this advantage is that we're going to suddenly default to superpowers instead of using other things. First, we're going to argue that defaulting to superpowers is better based on our first contention. We see that we can have cleaner wars. We give you examples like invisibility, super strength, super speed, a few more psychic skills, which we actually reference in our second contention, and bulletproof skin. We see that if you have a psychic who can tell someone where a person in disguise is hiding, who's going to go drop a bomb or something like that, and we have some an invisible person who could go and kill them instead of having the bomb kill 6 million people or whatever it is, that's going always to be better. So you're going to prefer decreasing collateral damage over collateral damage. Second of all, diplomacy doesn't always work, right? The reason why we go into certain countries is because we don't have a good diplomatic relationship with them. Or you can think of Iraq and Afghanistan, the amount of stuff we could have prevented if we had superheroes who could have done things things more surgically, that would have been insane, right? So we would actually be preventing the most death in our world. Okay, the second argument on the whole like default to superpowers thing is that this is the most predictable and most like logical interpretation of the resolution because of the way that superpowers would become military. All right, 2 more responses that they give on our case. First, they say that we're going to cause an arms race. The response here is that China is already like technologically ahead of us. Like there's already a technological arms race, which means this is again non-unique. They say there's going to be a superpowers arms race, but like I don't see the point. Like I don't see the like problem here if each country can now lessen the amount of deaths that they cause because of superhero strength because their military is in charge of it, and it isn't a bad actor. Then I don't see like what the problem is here. Second of all, if there is an arms race, like this is better for the United States because it leads to more innovation and we can increase United States hedge, which is going to be good for the economy. Their last response here is that soldiers are going to turn against like the military industrial complex. The thing here is that like their super serum would be like taken away from them. You're not, again, there's testing that happens where you're not going to be able to pass it if you're a bad person, right? So the DoD is always going to be able to check back against that. Overall, you're voting on AF because we give you the most like the impacts that have the most magnitude and probability if this world were to occur. Thank you.
All right, hey everyone. I'm gonna start off with the top of case and like on the definitions of this round. Then I'm gonna move on to the negation case and respond to some of the things they just said in their last speech, and then I'll move on to the affirmations case at the end. I have 8 minutes. I'm gonna go where I need to go. Okay, my time begins now. So judges, I want to start this off with a big overview of this round. My opponents haven't actually given any specific examples of a plan or any sort of specific superpowers that they're going to be implementing in this world, in this hypothetical world. They do not give you any specific examples of how the Department of Defense is going to be training these people. What types of training, like what types of like programs are they going to be using in order to ensure that these people do not use these powers for bad? They don't give you any explanation for this, and even if they did, it would not be in the resolution to begin with. Whereas we have historical examples of how all of this, by giving people superpowers, people are going to only increase and reinforce the inequalities of our world. Now, let me go into some of the specific responses that they make. They basically say that the negation doesn't have any sort of alternate weighing mechanism. Yes, we don't have an alternate weighing mechanism. We agree that this should be based off of preponderance of evidence. Whoever has the most evidence in this round is the one that should win. But we also agree that we have more evidence than them because we have examples of historical precedents of eugenics, of World War II, of historical things that if we give power to more people than another group is always going to end up with the shorter end of the stick. Now, they also talk about how their plan is completely predictable. I'm going to take all of POI at the end. They talk about how their plan is completely predictable, but nothing is predictable if superpowers have never been used before. And even so, they don't even tell us what superpowers they were using. So how is this plan predictable in any way? But even if you buy that, military superpowers are still bad, and I'm going to get onto that a little bit later. They also talk about how they're putting meth into soldiers and they're training people to use guns. Overall, none of this makes sense. Steroids are not superpowers. Any historical evidence, that was the only historical evidence that they have, it's just not working. Their entire plan is open to human error. This training is not going to occur. Now, let me move on to our case and kind of respond to some of the things they said. They talked about this first contention, talking about how because civilians won't get the powers, none of the things in our contention work. That's the entire point that we're making, judges. The entire point of this first contention is saying that only the powerful, the rich, the elite are getting these powers. That is what we mean. The civilians, the ordinary people are going to be at a lower class than everyone else. That is what we're proving through this plan. And they literally concede to this. People will not get the powers. That is a bad thing. What the affirmations plan does is it gives this power only to people who are part of the military, which puts them at a higher class than the rest of the population. This is only going to increase discrimination, increase inequality. It's going to reinforce eugenics. Ordinary people will not get it because they will be seen as unfavorable, and the poor especially will not be able to get it because they would have to pay for all this training and all this work that they're being put in. But even though the affirmation doesn't specify any sort of method of training that they're going to be using in this plan. Now, they do talk about how eugenics are bad, but if civilians have it, then the Department of Defense will check back against it by creating super soldiers to hurt people even more. But doesn't this sound a lot like police brutality in the United States right now? Any sort of training that the United States federal government is doing is only going to be replicating what we already have. And because this round is based off of preponderance of evidence, whichever side has the most evidence, we are showing you that police brutality is one big example of how the government isn't the best at training people. The government isn't the best at creating the best soldiers. People are abusive and people will use that power badly. We've proven this, and they literally just say that these are the facts and that they win on preponderance of evidence and that none of this has any reasoning whatsoever. That is not true. They also talk about how classism is somehow not a direct result of the plan, but we're actually arguing that this plan is going to give some people power and others not. Let me look at it this way, Judge. If we had this technology, it sounds great, it sounds fun, but the only way that this technology would ever work is if everyone has equal access to it. And what the affirmations plan does is it specifically narrows in on one population, people who are part of the military, and giving them special access that other groups of people do not have access to. That is simply discriminatory. That is simply going to reinforce inequality, and they have no responses to this in any sort of way. They just say that it's not going to have an inequality, that it's not going to lead to other groups being seen as lesser than. But there's no way. If someone has superpowers, everyone is going to look to them to be the most powerful. Now let's move on to their specific contentions about collateral damage and war being more surgical. Judge, I just want to argue that their entire case is pretty much in defense of the military, in defense of violence, in defense of all of these terrible things that have only produced more death and more destruction. They're saying that they're going to mitigate the casualties of war and that they're going to try to limit the amount of people that are dying here, but in actuality, they're only enforcing war. As my partner very eloquently said, this plan is only going to make people more trigger happy. If you have this technology, you're going to want to use it against other countries. This is only going to cause more death and destruction. The team that is causing more death and destruction is not the one that you should be voting for in this round. Now let's go on to some specific responses. They basically talk about how training is going to solve all of the problems of this technology being possibly abusive. I have three huge responses to this. First of all, nowhere in the resolution does it state that the affirmation can implement any sort of training that goes along with this case. So it's completely abusive and unpredictable of them to come up here and use training in their case as a way to strengthen it after the fact. Secondly, training doesn't even work because of the example that I brought up earlier, the police brutality. Police go through years of training in order to get the credits that they need in order to wield a gun. But obviously we've seen through the Black Lives Matter movement that the police are abusing their power. Think about that, but times 1,000. That is what these superpowers that the affirmation is trying to give people. Now, thirdly, my big response is that what are they even training for? People have never had superpowers before. This is completely hypothetical. What are they even going to train for? And because this is new technology, no one will know the side effects of it. It might not work. It might be dangerous. It might not, even if you do train, it's always room for human error. Now, I just want to respond to one of the biggest things they say about probability. Really, if 99% of people use this stuff irresponsibly, even if 100% of the people, 99% of them are super good and they've done the training, even if one person uses it wrongly, then the entire world blows up. As my partner said, it only takes one person, one match to set off an entire fire of destruction and death. That is not what we want. This is only going to increase the tensions between countries. Now let's move on to their second contention of war being more surgical and how they're going to make it more concise and decrease casualties. Really, these two contentions are basically the same thing. They're just trying to promote war, promote danger. Really, I want to turn this entire argument and argue that terrorist countries who get access to these superpowers is really bad. My partner said that it will cause an arms race. It will lead to other countries looking to the US and seeing what we do, and they're going to take this technology from us, and they're only going to increase the amount of this technology around the world. That one group is going to be spread to other countries, and these countries might not have the good intentions that the affirmation claims the Department of Defense has. These countries are going to use this technology badly. Let's look at this round as a whole. My opponents are probably going to come up here in their next speech and talk about how because civilians won't get the powers, they're somehow not going to cause any of the impacts of discrimination, of eugenics, of classism. But this is simply not true. If you have such powerful, dangerous technology, you need to ensure that everyone has equal access to it, or else you're only going to increase discrimination. You're going to increase classism. You're going to increase racial and equality and all of these things are very, very evident. It is proof that the affirmations plan simply does not work. You must vote on behalf of negation for this. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Just to reiterate, my name is Ria Jane, and I will be the last speaker for the negation team in today's debate. Just to recap what I'll be doing in this speech, first I will be talking about overall overview of the round in total. Then I will be going on to my opponent's affirmative case and disassembling it. Finally, I will be talking about the reasons that the negation wins, and then I will be analyzing which side you're voting for in the debate. All right, with no further ado, my time starts now. So at the end of the day, Judge, we agree that this is a fact round that should be evaluated by preponderance of evidence. Because superpowers have never been made before, we need to take into the account the wording of the resolution which says, if the technology existed, it will allow the medical procedures which gave human beings superpowers. Keep that in mind while we tell you the number of historical examples about eugenics, about so many other things that clearly prove that anything that has to do with superpowers is uniquely bad. But now, two major problems my opponents have messed up in the debate as a whole. The first thing they talk about is superpowers. My opponents do not even come up here as the affirmation. They are supposed to tell us what superpowers, but they don't. The first speaker talks about invisibility. The second speaker comes up here and she starts talking about psychic powers. Does this make any sense to you? This seems pretty abusive by the affirmative team, and if I were you, Judge, I would drop them straight away on this. But second of all, the main thing that they are going to go for here is the Department of Defense training. I'll be talking about this more later on, but I urge you to just look at the resolution and analyze, did the House ever say anything about Department of Defense training? No, it did not. If you look at the specific resolution, it just says, will endow human beings with superpowers. It does not say supercharged soldiers. It does not say military veterans. It just says human beings. Therefore, you're analyzing it as the human being population. Now, let's go into the affirmative case and talk about why it's bad for two reasons. The first is training.
Stop time, please.
Mm-hmm.
The analysis that the wording in the resolution only pertains to the broad human being population is completely new.
All right, I was extending the responses my partner made about how Department of Defense training was not stated anywhere in the resolution, and I was just cross-applying the resolution to that, which I can do. So it's up to the judge's discretion. All right, anyway, I'm at 1 minute and 30 seconds. I'm gonna continue with the affirmation case. Just to reiterate my points my partner made on training, their entire case relies on the fact that this training is going to happen. Again, first of all, it doesn't say that in the resolution. Second of all, they have no specifics of this training. How much training? How much money are they going to put into it? It's completely hypothetical. But third and finally, even if they have this training is really, really bad. It creates these millions of super soldiers, which are basically like a bunch of random hulks running around and screaming and saying like, oh yeah, we're gonna make peace to the world. I urge you, think about the situation that's going on right now. The Black Lives Matter movement, if anything, has showed us that the police cannot be trusted. If we are doing the fact round as we are right now, we should be evaluating it by the real world precedents. And the real world shows us that no, we cannot rely on the military to solve all of our problems. We need to rely on diplomacy. If you want to vote for diplomacy in this round instead of a bunch of crazy hulks running around and trying to solve problems, you're voting for the neg. But finally, the second thing that they talk about is overall the entire super soldiers thing. And I again want to just argue that if you believe that increasing military power means you are saving lives, that means you do not see the problem with police brutality. You do not see the issues that are going on in the status quo. Unless we solve our government first, we will end up in this dystopian society. We're telling you that right now. Okay, now I've successfully told you why superpowers are not necessarily a good thing as the affirmative says. Why are you voting for the neg? You're voting for us on two major reasons. The first, I know this is going to sound weird, but we're winning on the terrorism argument, as my partner said. Their second contention about how more countries will get access to these weapons is really bad, because even if every single country is good except one terrorist country can use those superpowers, they will blow up the world, and then it's the end of the world as we know it. 1%. If there's a 1% probability, we still win. But the second and final reason you're winning, the reason why the negation team is uniquely winning, is because of the classism or eugenics argument. no matter what, in both worlds, either the technology is too unaffordable for the poor, or if you somehow agree and still think it is by just the affirmative definition of military power, ordinary people do not get access to these superpowers, and they're seen as unfavorable because now they're like the standard of blonde hair and blue eyes, like in the Holocaust. They are not the desired population. And because of that, judges, because you are creating more classism, more discrimination, and you're increasing the number of deaths, I cannot stress this enough, you are voting for neg. Thank you.
Sorry, I was unmuted. My order is just going to be a quick overview of the round, and then I'm going to go into like the topic case arguments, and then I'm going to go into the F case arguments. 5 minutes. My time is going to start now. Judge, we are going to be winning today's debate because we are going to be the only team that actually defends the resolution. Let me read the resolution again. This House, if the technology existed, would allow medical procedures which endowed human beings with superpowers. We are going to be the only team that's actually following the resolution in today's debate. Lucy comes up and gives you a lot of analysis as to like why we're not actually seeing it, that they're implementing this technology and giving people these actual superpowers. We're just saying that this would happen, and under normal ways and means, this would probably happen between the U.S. Department of Defense. Ultimately, Judge, what we can see is at the point where the negation concedes one of Lucy's main arguments, which is that they literally say that they agree that the United States federal government is going to be they're going to concede that the United States federal government is the most predictable actor. We're ultimately going to be winning today's debate. At the point where they concede this entire argument, what we can see is that the Department of Defense is going to be the most probable actor at the point. And if the United States federal government was to do this, what we can see is that there's no way that they're just going to give this extremely harmful, dangerous technology to civilians. Judge, let me ask you, I'm going to ask you to gut check this. At what point, if we had superheroes, if we had huge missiles that would kill thousands of people and be able to strike people in like exactly, why would regular people get this? Why would like the rich and elite have a chance to actually gain these superheroes when they're literally going to be used for war, when they're going to be causing a lot of death and destruction? We give you examples about how Lockheed Martin are considered military contracts because they cause a lot of damage. So Judge, I'm going to ask you this. Why would regular people, like the rich and elite, as they say, would have access to any of these at the point where they literally, why would they have access to any of these at the point where like it's going to be the United States federal government doing this? And okay, and even if you, and also what we can see is that the United States federal government is going to be doing this for good and not going to use it for destruction within the military anyway. So at the point where you're buying that these regular people aren't going to get access to these superhuman abilities, we're ultimately going to be winning today's debate because we're going to be taking out every single piece of offense the negation has. The negation's two contentions revolve around eugenics and the idea that that the rich and the elite are going to cause this and lead to a lot of discrimination and dehumanization. At the point where regular people aren't going to be getting these, why would the rich and elite suddenly reinstate eugenics? They don't have a response to this. They never tell you how they're going to get this. They never respond to Lucy's argument about how the United States federal government is going to be implementing this. So if the point where they concede this, we ultimately can see that we're clearly winning the debate because we take out their contention. We don't allow them to gain access because ultimately people aren't going to be getting this. This is going to be a weapon that is used by the United States. Even if you don't buy this, we're winning on the contention about collateral damage. Collateral damage is going to be really, really crucial here. Their response, they only have one response throughout the entirety of the debate, which is going to be that of training. They say that training is not going to work, and instead it's going to be like police brutality, and it's going to spread a lot of violence and hatred. But ultimately what we can see is that they concede a lot of the arguments that I make in the PMC and Lucy makes in her MG. We give you solvency and reasoning as to why they're going to get this training. The Department of Defense is a foreign agency, which means that it's not done in the same way that the police are trained. So you can't be buying this argument about police brutality anyway. At the point where this is going to be done foreignly, and people are actually going to be able to get this training, we can see that it's probably going to lead to the most amount of surgical strikes. We give you examples about how, like, if a psychic were able to do this, we could automatically kill like the #1 person in like Al Qaeda or something. Also, what we can see is that the military literally gets trained for everything, so it makes zero sense as to why they wouldn't get trained for superheroes. At the point where the affirmation takes out all of the negations offense, because regular people aren't going to be getting this technology, and we are going to be the only team that solves for collateral damage and causes more surgical wars, which is what we can see is going to happen in either world, because the United States will always be in wars, and what we can see is that ultimately surgical wars are going to be really much more preferable, and are going to be much more preferable in the world of the affirmation. And the negation has no offensive arguments in today's debate, so there's going to be no reason why you're voting for them. And I urge you to cast a strong ballot for the affirmation in today's debate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So judges, now you can go over deciding your decisions and message me in the Zoom chat, and I will go and check it after I make my decision. So we will decide that now.
Just want to say good job everyone, and like thank you guys for judging as well.
Yeah, I second that.
Yeah, thank you so much.